Hey, hold on! I just had a great idea! Use the Dragon Balls to summon the dragon. He'll tell us where the doctor is. We take out the doctor and all of our problems are solved! You get it?
Before the onset of the android arc, Bulma made a very logical statement when it pertained to the androids. She advised that they use the Dragon Balls to locate Gero and kill him before completing the android threat. This idea was of course immediately rejected by Vegeta, who wanted to face off against the androids. And it really goes to show how much attraction Bulma still had for Vegeta, considering that this is right before she broke up with Yamcha and hooked up with Vegeta. And you must have a lot of interest in someone knowing that this person's decision directly threatens your life, your planet, and your future unborn child. But of course, Vegeta didn't give the final stamp of approval, as Goku was the last one to put the nail in the coffin and seal away Earth's fate. He agreed with Vegeta to not pursue Gero prematurely, as it would be unfair to Gero, who hasn't done anything yet. But what if he actually did? Well, we must first admit that we don't know exactly when Dr. Gero fully completed the production of the androids. It is said in chapter 350 that it was 19 who finished the procedure that turned Gero into an android, into what we would call Android 20. And if numbers are a side of sequential order, this would mean that 17, 18, and even 16 were theoretically finished by that point. And considering the fact that 17 and 18 were unaware of 16 and 19 in the present timeline, and considering the fact that 16 and 19 never existed in the future, this implies that there is no logical blueprint in Gero's decision making. He just had active and inactive models depending on the moment at hand. Our heroes would first make a proper wish to stop Dr. Gero. Now, there are many creative ways that you can go about this. Objectively, the best way to directly stop Gero would be to wish for Dr. Gero to simply teleport to where Goku is, so he and everyone else can basically kill him on the spot. Now, to be honest, this is a hilarious outcome, and it was a lot of fun just imagining this. Just picture Dr. Gero using his supercomputer to construct the androids, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, he just gets teleported out of nowhere to where Goku is and dies. Just imagine his shock and facial expressions just seeing that he was hiding, and all of a sudden, because of a wish, he's out in the open for everybody to just kill him. So what now happens after Gero is dead and the entire android threat is gone? Well, the first major difference would be power scaling. In a twist of fate typical to the Qaaman what-if style, we all know that making a logical decision has an adverse effect. To be specific, this involved all of the major fighters essentially getting weaker over the course of 3 years. But to be even more specific, this involves 2 different sets of training. Remember, the Z fighters had trained non-stop for 3 years after the android warning for Trunks. Then when you combine that with them originally losing to the androids and preparing for the Cell threat, they then went into the Room of Spirit in time for even more emergency training. With the android threat now gone, most of the characters would be much weaker. Even the weaker characters like Krillin, Yamcha, and Tien. But the most significant difference would be the character of Gohan, because with no android threat he would receive little to no training, as there was effectively no need to, and because Goku would be alive. The sad thing about Gohan is that if his life is too pampered, he may never even attain Super Saiyan 1. So throw Super Saiyan 2 out of the picture. That's basically a pipe dream considering the circumstances at hand. And out of all of the main characters, Gohan is the one who definitely benefited the absolute most from training over all of these years. He originally went from being far weaker than Goku, Vegeta, Piccolo, and future Trunks to being far stronger than all of them by a huge margin, and his character would without a doubt suffer the most in this situation when it comes to power scaling. But what about Goku? Well, for starters, we must first address his heart virus. Assuming he still gets it, Goku would simply take the medicine and would eventually heal up. The good news is that since there are no androids to fight, he would still train naturally on his own and would improve somewhat, albeit at a much slower pace. Of course, this means Piccolo and Gohan wouldn't train with him directly, and this also means that the idea of a Room of Spirit in Time wouldn't be an immediate idea. And if Goku ever decided to go into the Room of Spirit in Time, it would be in the future on his own accord, and his gains would be far weaker with no Gohan and Piccolo to push him farther beyond, plus the initial training that they did with Goku in the first place. Now, Vegeta is a very interesting case. Because of Super Saiyan Goku and Super Saiyan Trunks, he would still have the desire to push himself like never before, even on his own. It's even possible that Vegeta would be even stronger than Goku, since his gains from the Android arc surpassed Goku directly. albeit this was in comparison to Goku who was infected, so it's hard to measure them exactly with precision, but losing to 18 was one of the greatest gifts in his life. It humbled him and pushed him into ascending past the Super Saiyan. And with only Goku to test himself against, Vegeta is also more likely to remain more of a villain than an anti-hero. His ego would be insane without someone to keep him in check. And if Goku is only around equal to Vegeta, if not worse, then Vegeta would have no one else to set his sights on. It's doubtful that Vegeta would blow up the Earth as he seemed past that level of evil at this point, but settling down and being a family man is totally out of the question. Just remember that all of the times where Vegeta got closer to Earth's inhabitants was because Goku was absent. So with Goku being around, Vegeta would never develop into the character that we saw later on. So ultimately, it's unrealistic to imagine a growing bond between Vegeta and future Trunks. Now what about Mr. Piccolo? Well, he's a pretty strange case, because he trains himself all the time, and because of this, his natural power wouldn't drop off as much as it would. But not training with Goku and Gohan definitely would make him weaker than the Piccolo that fought against Dr.Gero. And of course, as you guess, not getting wrecked by the androids means that he would never fuse with Kami. This of course will put Piccolo so far below his theoretical potential, but on the bright side, this also does mean the Dragon Balls would still stay intact. But is this really a good thing? Is having Dende as a guardian actually better? We will find out later on. Now unfortunately for future Trunks, things don't turn out as well, as they unfortunately never do. To begin, he would never be as strong as he originally was for all the reasons that we said for the previous characters. Now the bright side to all of this is that he would still travel to the present timeline to deal with the android threat 3 years later, only to find out that the androids have already been dealt with since Goku listened to Bulma and took out Dr.Gero. So what would Trunks do? Well, he would visit Gero's lab and use any sort of evidence or the Dragon Balls to discover a weakness. After doing this, he could easily travel back to his future timeline and kill the androids via a shutdown device or any other alternative method that Bulma could propose. This ultimately creates a huge problem that has never been discussed in the history of Dragon Ball What Ifs on this channel. And this problem is that because our version of future Trunks would have been much weaker than the Trunks that got stronger, this Trunks would go to the future and would eventually be killed by Cell, the same way that the original future Trunks was killed by Cell, because he didn't get the power boost to kill the androids by fighting them and to also kill Cell when he tried to ambush him. But why is this the most unique problem in What If history? Well, if Cell is successful in killing Trunks, and by also taking his time machine, that means that Cell would effectively create an infinite time loop in 4 different timelines. In both of these loops, Trunks is always going to the past, killing the androids, being killed by Cell who creates a new timeline and then does the same thing over and over and over and over and over again into perpetuity. So if you thought Trunks' life was bad in the future originally when Zeno erased everything, just imagine being caught in an infinite existence of being killed forever. Now this brings up an important question about the present Trunks and whether or not he would still be bored. Considering the fact that Vegeta would be furious at Bulma for her plan coming through and killing Dr.Gero early, this could cause a butterfly effect to occur where they would never get together. This is definitely more likely than it's unlikely, and it's crazy to believe that by making the right decision of killing Gero, that Trunks may never even exist in the present timeline. So one Trunks dies and lives in a perpetual existence of being killed and going back in time and being killed over and over again, and the other Trunks never exists. Now Dende is an interesting case as mentioned before. Because Piccolo and Kami would have never fused together in all likelihood, this basically means that there would have never been a need to bring Dende to planet Earth. Now, you can say that that's not necessarily a huge change, but when you consider the fact that because of Dende's existence and remodeling the Dragon Balls, Earth was able to have more wishes, but if we only went with the Kami model, then we could only have one wish. And as you may have guessed, this ultimately means that if our characters ever got into a problem in the future, having limited wishes would obviously put them in a worse situation. And that ultimately brings us to another big question. What happens with the Cell that traveled to the main timeline? Well, to be honest, it's hard to pinpoint exactly how things would go since there are so many different variables. For example, when exactly does future Trunks go back to the future? When exactly does Goku get the virus? When exactly does Cell get discovered? Despite this, there is good news and bad news. Cell would be a massive problem early but an easy problem later on. with all of the Saiyans already being several stages below where they originally were, imperfect Cell alone is strong enough to blow every character to dust. The only hope would be if Goku teleported all of his friends safely somewhere else, but we have to remember that Cell would be extremely angry. This would be a Cell that never got a chance to absorb the androids in the future, and now he has absolutely no chance of ever being able to do it in the present since the androids are gone in the present timeline too. So the only way he could get stronger would be by absorbing others, and because Piccolo and Kami would not have fused, this means that Piccolo in all likelihood wouldn't have had the opportunity to trick Cell into giving him information, and wouldn't be strong enough to survive a fight at all. So for all of these reasons, we have two major potential outcomes. One, where Cell kills all of our unprepared fighters as a complete shock, and the other is a scenario where Goku and his friends somehow find out about Cell and prepare for him anyways out of a precaution in the Room of Spirit and Time. The second outcome is extremely unlikely but worth mentioning since the other outcome is completely negative and goes in a negative direction, so if you want to continue the video and see how it turns out, let's go with the less likely option. Now because Cell could never transform, this means he is capped in his imperfect stage, which means Goku, Vegeta, or Piccolo, and even Trunks if he's still around, all just really need one day to stop him. Because this version of Gohan would not have trained for 3 years and would be far weaker than even the Gohan before going into the Room of Spirit and Time. So Gohan would be out of the equation completely. This means that Goku trains himself and comes out ready to decimate Cell. Now on the bright side, Cell can't manipulate Vegeta since he can't find any androids to prove that he can get stronger somehow, so this ultimately means that Cell hides on Earth until he's eventually found on the planet and killed. Now the other way we could look at this happening is that out of desperation, Cell might just blow up the planet since he could survive in space due to Frieza and King Cole's genetics. So if we analyze the positive route of this outcome, then Cell ends up dead. The only thing is that our characters would still be far weaker than they originally were because they would not have been pushed as hard, considering the fact that Cell obviously wouldn't have been able to get stronger and push our characters farther. But as you probably guessed, there's a big issue that happens after this. Babidi and Deborah 7 years later would be totally unstoppable as our characters wouldn't even be able to sniff the power that they had in the Buu Saga. And because Gohan never went Super Saiyan 2, it's unlikely that Goku or Vegeta would have ever learned it, if not learned it until a long time. Because if you don't know how to aim for Super Saiyan 2, how can you ever get it? It's the same exact issue with future Gohan. If he never knew to aim for a Saiyan transformation beyond Super Saiyan, how could he ever even conceive of getting it? And this is just Super Saiyan 2. So we could completely throw Super Saiyan 3 out of the equation, especially with Goku being alive and not being able to train in the afterlife to push his body farther. Now the good news is that Buu would most likely never hatch, but it doesn't matter since Earth's forces would have been completely wiped out by Deborah. And yes, Goku can always teleport away in an emergency, but it wouldn't solve the actual problem directly. And the biggest issue of all is Gohan, because with him being so much weaker, it literally changes the entire fabric of Dragon Ball history. Keeping dr.gero alive was unexpectedly a good thing as it forced Goku, Gohan, Vegeta, Trunks, and Piccolo to all get much stronger. And killing Gero early would make our characters far too unprepared for future fights. So don't even think about Beerus and the Super Saiyan God Premonition and everything that happened afterwards. Our characters would be enjoying their eternal existence in the afterlife. So ultimately, we end up with a perpetual time loop of Cell killing Trunks forever, and a present timeline where everyone is dead anyways. All because they listened to Bulma, who made a smart decision. And while we're on the subject of Dragon Ball What Ifs, you're definitely going to want to check out What If Cell Killed Gohan, which is a dark timeline analysis, What If Goku and Vegeta fully trained Trunks and Goten, and what if Frieza somehow revived King Cole and teamed up with him in the future. And until next time, stay cool and stay safe, my friends.